Hello and welcome to the Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. I'm your host, Dr. David Hardy. And today on our show, we've got another amazing guest. He is a resiliency expert, a speaker, coach, and award-winning author. Oh, and he is the only man in history to run a marathon with someone else's heart and lungs. Welcome to the show, Mark Black. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks, sir. How are you?
Oh, fantastic.
Excellent.
This has been a journey for yourself. Like, life did not start off too kindly to yourself, did it?
No, it was a bit of a bumpy beginning and then a bumpy middle, and but that's life for all of us, isn't it? There's challenges along the way.
Absolutely. Now, just kind of walk us through, though. You had a heart defect when you were nice and young there, and
yeah. So I was born with what's something called the aortic stenosis. So the one of the valves in the heart didn't work, and I had open heart surgery to correct that when I was a day old. And medevaced by a helicopter from Moncton to Halifax, and then another surgery when I was a year old. And then I was very fortunate to do fairly well for quite a long time. That wasn't the prediction, but overall was pretty stable for 20 plus years. And then in 2001, I developed I developed congestive heart failure rather, that eventually required the need for a transplant.
Wow. And what was kind of going through your mind there when you're like, oh, I need a transplant?
So I was at university pursuing an education degree, and I was 23 years old and male and young and stubborn and invincible. So I ignored all of the symptoms that I should have been paying attention to sooner until they became critical. And I was short of breath all the time. I was tired and taking naps in the middle of the day and all those kind of things. And I went home to see my parents after the end of exams. And my mom took one look at me and said, "We're going to the hospital right now." And I had lost a third of my body weight in about 3 months. Doctor saw me and said, "Well, you need to go to Halifax right now to see the cardiac team." So we did that. I was admitted for almost a month. And at the end of that, they said, the only thing left for us to do for you is to try and get you a heart-lung transplant, which was a huge shock. I mean, we knew that transplant was in the future someday, but all of a sudden it was here, and that was a big shock to the system. And we weren't sure if I was even a candidate anymore because I had let my condition deteriorate to the point where I was so sick they weren't sure I could survive the surgery. So fortunately, the team in Toronto was willing to put me on their list. And in October of 2001, my dad and I packed our bags, left my 3 younger brothers with my mom at home, and moved to Toronto to start waiting for this transplant. And we ended up waiting for the better part of a year until I got the surgery in September of 2002.
Wow. Yeah. Did they put you on this list because they just had a feeling you were tough and one of these guys that was going to make it?
I don't know. It's funny because they, the donor has to match, obviously, right? So,
right.
In one sense, I was in competition for a lot of people because I'm small statured, of 5 feet tall, weigh 120 pounds. So I'm not a typical recipient in that way, which means if there was a donor that was going to fit, there wasn't a lot of competition, if you think about it that way. So that might have been one of the reasons. But the transplant team in Toronto, the lung transplant team in Toronto, is also pioneering in many respects. They've developed a lot of technology. They were the first to do lung transplant in the world. So I think they were more keen to maybe take a risk than the average program might have been, which was fortunate for me.
Right. Now, this is a story you've told quite a few times now, and you've been on stage, you've been in front of so many different people's companies, you're coaching, but you're still in some way kind of living this, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, transplant is a treatment, not a cure. So, from the very beginning, they say, even if everything goes well, you're going to trade one set of problems for hopefully more preferable set of challenges, from medications to preventing rejection to all of those things. And eventually, the organs just stop working. It's just a matter of how long we can make them last. And I was given a prediction that I would last maybe, a 50-50 chance to make it 5 years was the original prediction. And
Wow.
then I think 30% chance to make it 10. And I'm at 22, and knock on wood, the heart and lungs are still working quite well. Unfortunately, after 22 years on all of those meds, the kidneys are now not working. So
Oh,
I'm on
jeez.
dialysis, and will be listed for a kidney transplant. And that's the current challenge. And actually, it's going very well. The biggest challenge with dialysis is scheduling, because you're in hospital for dialysis treatments 3 days a week, 4 hours at a time, which is not real conducive to a traveling speaker's schedule. Uh, and the other challenge, interestingly enough, is that dialysis dries you out. That's part of the process to get rid of excess fluid.
Right.
And as it does that, it also dries vocal cords. So as you can hear, my voice struggles the next day,
Oh, yes.
which is
Wow.
not great when you're a speaker.
So with all these challenges though, what are you doing to keep yourself healthy? Like you had the transplant and you ran a couple marathons afterwards.
Mhm.
So you're obvious, and you've gone way beyond what they had predicted, as you said, but
Yeah.
you must have changed something and you're like, no, I'm going to survive. And yeah, a lot of it's your mindset, but what else are you doing physically to stay healthy and to keep
Yeah,
the
I
mind
credit.
active?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think maintaining health, fitness, nutrition, all of those things plays a major role. And my mom and dad were both physical education teachers by trade, so I
Okay.
credit them with raising myself and my three brothers with that mindset that taking care of our bodies is important. Being active is important. Um, so post transplant, yeah, I was running on the treadmill within 4 or 5 months, or jogging on the treadmill anyway, um, and never really stopped. I mean, just taking different forms. I did after the fourth marathon. We had two kids at that point, and I realized that long distance training was not fair to my wife. She was taking care of two kids, and I was going out to run for 4 hours and then useless the rest of the day. And training was, a 40-hour a week second job. So I stopped doing that, and then found a new obsession with CrossFit and did that for 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And then when COVID hit, I caught COVID 3 different times, which as a lung
Wow.
transplant recipient was scary.
Definitely.
Um, Fortunately, had no real long term effects other than my my heart rate will jump very quickly when I do intense exercise, and so
Okay.
CrossFit became kind of unmanageable. So I'm back to more endurance, longer, slower. But yeah, movement and moving my body has always been a priority for me.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then you have to be eating well, right?
Yeah, well, and it's funny with it. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty good anyway. But then with once I started experiencing kidney failure, then there's a whole bunch of dietary restrictions that you have to kind of put in place in order to maintain health. So I'm
Right.
watching increased protein intake and low salt and getting lots of nutrition and lots of nutrients rather. So yeah, pretty careful about the diet.
Wow. That is a ton to be going through. And you mentioned earlier, um, well, everybody has their challenges, but your challenges have been a bit bigger than a lot of people. When you talk about resiliency, did you ever go through a phase where you're like, well, geez, I'm going through more than that person. Why can't they pick it up? Or were you always, no, let's
Oh,
see
I mean,
how
yeah,
we can get you
I've had,
better.
yeah, I've had tons of moments, tons of dark days, and tons of it's not fair and why me. Um, I think the learning process, especially waiting for the transplant, that was a massive transformation psychologically for me. To learn, it's most of what I teach in my book and in my programs came from that time because you're forced to face hard truths. Uh, I was in hospital for 6 months leading up to the transplant, so I had nothing but time to think, which is good and bad. Uh,
Yeah,
and you're
that could
forced to kind of
be pretty maddening.
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. It was so I spent about the first month kind of just going stir crazy and being frustrated and angry, and then I had to kind of learn to say, okay, what do I have to accept in this situation in order to maintain mental health? What do I have to let go of and try to not control, so that I can free up the mental space and mental energy to deal with what I'm dealing with. And so letting go of that resistance to the situation, learning to accept what was, even though I didn't like it, which took time, was a massive help. And then learning to be adaptable, right? How do we transform how we think and behave when the world around us changes? Because those of us
Right.
who are not willing to do that struggle, right? And we live in a time of continuous change. And so people are always kind of in that space of wishing things were the way they used to be instead of embracing the new reality.
Right. And what does that mean though? Like a new reality, like when it is dark? Um, what is that acceptance, or do you need that resistance to it to continue to fight?
I mean, I think it's both and. So I always said that I tried to hold the duality of aspiring, hoping for a great outcome, but also accepting the possibility that that might not happen and trying to find some version of happiness in the reality that I was living. So it was a far from ideal situation to be living in hospital as an inpatient for 6 months. But I had to learn how to figure out how do I live some quality of life. Like people would say all the time, what's it like to have life on hold? Like, you kind of press the pause button and you're in hold here waiting for this transplant. And I went, that was always a strange idea to me because I thought, well, this life isn't on hold. Like, this is life. This is part of it. Right. And there may not be an app. There might not be a part two. Like, I don't know if I'm getting out of here. So I need to figure out how to find some quality of life amidst this challenge. And then I started to dig into researching that a little bit and learning about that and reading about people like Dr. Viktor Frankl, who wrote an amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning about his experience in concentration camps, right? And finding meaning and purpose in what was arguably the most dark and horrible environment known to human beings. And what I learned there was that this the space we occupy in our brain is far more critical than the physical space we're occupying with our body, right? You can be in almost any physical space and find peace and some level of happiness if you're trained that way properly. And vice versa. You can also be amidst the most, luxurious or happy or whatever environment and be miserable, right? I mean, we know people who seem to have everything that you could ever want and are still not very happy. So that was a big learning for me.
Right. Now, you've probably coached people on both sides of that spectrum. How do you work with someone who's, yeah, upbeat and things aren't going well, and somebody whose life should, well, appears great, but deep down isn't. What's the difference when you work with these
Yeah, that's a
people
great question. Yeah, so
and
I think, the person who is struggling to find happiness even though there's nothing objectively wrong. I mean, you got to eliminate the obvious things first. If it's a brain chemistry thing, then I send them to professionals that can help with depression because that's not my field or my expertise. Um, but beyond that, then we talk about things like awareness and we talk about things like gratitude and we say, okay, like, am I really conscious of what's going right in my life? I think most of us, well, we all have a negative bias because of our survival mechanism, right? But some of us allow it to get out of control. So there's a little bit of that is good, right? It prevents us from, it allows us to be aware of danger. It allows us to be keen, to have a keen sense of risk. But at the same time, if we allow it, we can get really good at finding what's wrong with every situation and not very good at noticing what's right. And so I work with people sometimes to just say, okay, let's do an inventory here. Like, what's really wrong? Um, and what's going right? And when you start to do that, they go, oh, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot that's going right that I wasn't aware of or was taking for granted. Um, on the other end of the spectrum, um, I think it's helping people to find the good amidst challenge. I always say, no matter what's going on, there is good to be found. You have to look really hard sometimes, but it's there, right? So, in my situation right now, I think about, um, well, first of all, I think I've experienced organ failure already, and the last time I experienced it was with my heart, and there's no backup plan with that. At least with kidney failure, there's dialysis. Like there's a backup plan, right? And it's not
right?
fun, but I can live on dialysis for years.
Yep. No.
So and there's a possibility of a transplant. So like the future is still optimistic. Um, in the hospital waiting for transplant, it was at least I'm Canadian. So I was really lucky to be born in this part of the world where there's a chance to survive.
Right.
I have an amazing family, so I didn't spend a single day in the hospital in that 6 months alone because somebody was there with me to keep me company and cheer me up and all that stuff. I had amazing medical care. So those were the things that I would try and focus on despite, yeah, there were aspects of the situation that were really challenging. And I think, again, it's not to be Pollyanna. I think that's dangerous too. To toxic positivity is a real thing. So it's
Right.
not to pretend that the challenges aren't there. It's just to say, yes, I acknowledge the challenges, but also I'm grateful for these resources and for the things that are going right.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about people whose lives, um, once again, on should be feeling better, and a lot of people start kind of picking on the youth and saying, "Well, geez, you're the best moment in the history of humankind here," yet they're not feeling it, and you're also working well, high level business people and all sorts, but you've also done a few things to
Yeah.
help younger people, right?
Yeah.
How
I've
does
worked
that kind of play out?
quite a bit with youth and when we have a 16 about to be 17-year old and a
Okay,
13 about to be 14-year-old. So, and then an 8-year-old. But so, yeah, so I'm
who's
very,
about to be 21, right?
who's about to, yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right. Um, so we're right in the thick of that world. And yeah, I mean, look, do they have that attitude sometimes? Sure. What I try and remember is, and what I try and remind other parents of is that part of that is our fault as the adults who raised them and are helping them guide them, um, because we've in many ways made their life too easy, right? We have created these people who can be sometimes entitled and not appreciate things, etc., because we've given them too much, or we've not forced them to face challenge. I mean, I could go on and on about a school system that doesn't fail kids when they don't pass their test, and and athletic programs that want to give everybody a medal, and what that does is in my view, is it teaches kids that the difference between making an effort and not making effort is there is no like there's no difference in the outcome. So why make an effort? Like kids are smart. They clue into these things really quickly and they go, wait a minute, I worked really hard. That person didn't. We both got the medal at the end.
Right.
Why should I work hard next time?
Yeah.
And then at some point we want them to work hard and they don't want to do it. And we go, well, what's the deal? So, I mean, I think part of it's on us. I think part of it is these things. That we're
Yeah.
all, I think,
The
grappling with
phones,
the
the tech.
consequences of that.
Yeah.
We're all dealing with the consequences of that, right? And to my point earlier, like to me, resilience is about. I always say resilience is not bouncing back; it's growing through. So many of us are now, especially when we talk about technology, we say, "Oh, geez, remember the good old days when we were kids and we just went outside and played and there was none of this stuff." And rightly or wrongly, that's not the reality today, and it's not. We're not returning to that. That's not going to happen, right?
It's not.
So how do we teach our kids how to live with these devices in some sort of healthy way? Because they're going to have them at some point. They're going to. We can prevent them from having them for a certain period of time, but at some point they have to deal with them. So, yeah, that's what we're working with our kids right now, actually, on healthy habits with their devices.
Right. And then what's the nonprofit you're working with there with youth and young people?
So I actually just stepped down from the board at Atlantic Wellness. It's an amazing organization based here in Moncton. And what they do is provide free professional mental health services for young people. So ages 13 to 20. So they realized that there was this big gap because young people, so high school students, middle school students, were having these mental health issues and they're going to their family doctor to get referred. And then the wait list to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist is months and months and months and months and months.
Right.
And that's if they have a family doctor, which many of them don't have. And so there was this big barrier, and you end up with people going to the ER in crisis because they're, in suicide watch, and they do a, psychiatric hold for 24 or 48 hours and then send them on their way again. And so this was an effort to try and create a bridge to help alleviate some of that problem. And they've done a massive amount of great work, and they still have a waiting list, but it's a much shorter one. And youth are able to access professional mental health services at no cost.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Then you also started up a charity run, the Transplant Run.
Yeah. So the Transplant Run started as an idea. Post-transplant, I was very excited about raising awareness about organ and tissue donation. And so, and again, coming from an athletic family, a run seemed to be the logical thing to do. So we started with, I don't know, a dozen of us, I think, walking around a park on the first year of the run.
Okay.
And then it grew each year a little bit. After 3 or 4 years, we got the running room involved. Then we spread to a couple of other cities. Then the running room and the Canadian Transplant Association helped us to grow it even further. And now there are, I think, something like 13 or 14 runs across the country that happen every year. And I'm not even really involved in it anymore. But yeah, the runs spread all across the country and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for organ and tissue donation awareness, which is really cool. So
that is really cool.
Very fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, with all of this, I can just tell you light up when we talk about you helping other people. And obviously you've had to face so much resilience, and when you're stuck in that battle, it's your own battle, and you get through it and it's like, okay, well, yeah, I got through it, or I'm getting through it. And you don't realize your own toughness at that point in time, or your own resiliency. What has it been like, though, when sharing this with other people to get them through their tough times? Like, what is the feeling for Mark Black when he's coaching or when he's working with a nonprofit
Yeah.
or writing a book. Like how much of this is just now? Yeah, it is something that whether it's forced upon me or not, I am really good at helping people and I love it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a tremendously rewarding thing to do, right? I mean, I think the greatest, those of us who are lucky enough to find work that we get paid for that is also incredibly rewarding, we're pretty darn lucky. And
Yes.
I happen to find one of those things. So, a lot of people have to go and find fulfillment through volunteer work or with a hobby or something else. And the job is what they do to, pay the bills. And I'm fortunate that I can do kind of one and the same because I get great reward out of the work that I do. Um,
That's a pretty humble answer. What is the feeling though inside when you're
I
helping
mean,
somebody?
it feels really good. It's
Nice.
yeah, it feels
Yeah.
it. I have many times had conversations with people or gotten an email or a social media message from someone, um, talking about some positive impact that something that I said has had on them, and I always say to them, this I can't, while I can't pay the power bill with this will keep me going for months, right? This is my fuel.
Yes.
Comments like that, right? And I keep a little file. And on the days when I'm struggling, because we all do, uh, I open that file and I read some of those messages and it reminds me why I do what I do.
What's your perspective on time now?
My perspective on time is, I think, forever changed. So I have a tattoo on my arm that says "Live Today," um, because for 6 months I was in the hospital pre-transplant because I had a heart arrhythmia that um, left me at high risk for sudden cardiac death. So I was literally on the precipice of my heart stopping at any second for 6 months,
Whoa.
which for the first month drives you insane, and then you learn to live with that risk and you kind of settle into that. But it makes you keenly aware of just how fragile life is. And so yeah, just I'm keenly aware that we are not promised tomorrow. And while I hope to live a long life, I probably won't. And so I try and make the most of the time that I have within logic and reason, right? Like, so it's not a
Right.
live every
Yeah.
day like your last day either, because that only works for so many days. Um,
Have
but I
you mapped
certainly,
that out? How many days does that last for?
yeah, I don't know. Uh, it gets exhausting real fast. I tried it. Yeah, you also run
Yeah.
out of like bucket list quality things to do after a little while, right? Like the laundry still needs to get done. So
Right.
yeah,
Now, writing a book's kind of on that list for most people, and you've got a few.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That well,
yeah.
yeah. It was a bucket list. The first one was a bucket list thing, and I had actually been keeping a journal while I was in the hospital, and I felt like there was some things in there that were useful for people, so I reshaped the journal into a book. And then I became a speaker, and I'm out on the speaking circuit, and we're I'm talking to people, and I'm talking to other colleagues who are saying, yeah, you need to have a book that's about your expertise. And so I went, okay, so I got to build write a resilience book. So the second book that I wrote that just came out last year is called the Resilience Roadmap, and it's the framework of resilience that I teach.
Nice. What's
Yeah.
kind of a few teasers there? Because yeah, I'm thinking
Well,
this is pretty amazing.
yeah, I mean, so the book outlines a framework of 7 steps. We don't go through all of them, but um, the two key ones I think for most of us are acceptance and adaptation. So understanding that unless and until you can accept the reality of what's going on, you will struggle to adapt to find it a new, better reality because you're draining yourself of time and energy every day fighting something that can't change. Right. So being angry and bitter and frustrated, whatever, is while completely understandable, is not productive. And so instead, I say we have to we have to close the gap between two critical moments. The moment of, oh no, like, oh no, this thing happened that I didn't want to happen. And then now what? In other words, now what am I going to do? And that gap in between those two moments can be 20 seconds or 20 years, depending on how we adapt to change. And so the goal is to say, okay, it's all right to have that frustration, that anger, that resistance. I don't like this. But as soon as possible, we need to move to, okay, but what am I going to do now? Because it is what it is, and I need to figure out how to thrive in a new environment. And that's really the essence of the whole book.
Okay. Yeah, and I do think it's a superpower for people to have the ability to zoom in and zoom out, and then somewhere in between. And too much of getting stuck in zoom in mode, oh, this is a horrible situation, is not a good idea. And then to zoom out, you're like, wow, there's beauty around me. And then it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, somewhere in between there's a mixture that I need to need to be able to navigate. And I applaud you on the work you're doing to really help people realize that, and to have this guide to hard times, or to even navigating just everyday human stuff.
Well, that's it, right? Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree. I think, people, we have this negative connotation of challenge, and we shouldn't necessarily, I don't think we should. Um, Often challenge leads to better things, right? Often that's where growth happens. Often that's where innovation happens. Often that's most of the. I like to ask people in presentations. I'll say, what's a proud moment in your life? And I might even get them to write it down. And then I'll ask them if that thing was easy or difficult to achieve. And invariably it was difficult. And so it's a reminder for all of us that like when we're facing a challenging situation, what's on the other side of this that's worth fighting for, because that's what's going to carry you through it. And so instead of trying to avoid it, ask yourself, what can I learn? How am I growing? How will I be better off after I go through this? Because that's, to me, where the meat of life is.
I love it. Now, how do people find you, Mark?
Super easy. Markblack.ca is the website, and I am Mark Black on all the social media channels. That's where you find me.
Excellent. Definitely check out Mark Black, and everyone needs a roadmap. So check out the book, The Resilience Roadmap. And of course, stay tuned to the next episode of The Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. Take care.